Boom, people, we're live. How we all doing? We are live. And as always, I've been doing this the last few weeks. Special guest on with me, Outmatch Boxing. How are you keeping, my friend? How are you keeping?
I'm very well, thank you, Gman. Flattered that you call me a special guest, and you're a very special host, I must say. So it's obviously my second time on the channel.
Second time. I think the last time you were only about 600 subs. I know you've kind of doubled in size since then. You're at nearly, 900 now or over 900?
Last I checked a few minutes ago, I was on 921. So yeah, in the 920s.
The goal for this isn't just to preview it. We want to get you to 1,000 subs. So I'm going to let you talk for a little bit. Tell people about your channel, what you do. I've obviously pinned your channel in the comment section there, so literally anyone can click on that. But let the people know what you do on your channel and just what to expect if they're subscribed to Outmatch Boxing.
Okay, so on my channel, you'll find basically what you find on many other boxing channels. You have the predictions, the previews, the breakdowns, that kind of stuff. But I like to delve into, in particular, the details of things. So talk a lot about technique and how the styles of particular fighters match up. Really go into the kind of keys to victory and when the fights happened, what had an effect where. In particular, as well, I do enjoy kind of highlighting the biomechanical perspective because, of course, boxing is the sport we love, but it is just a sport. It may be fighting, but it can still be categorized as movements and actions and all these different things. And I just like to try and get a full spectrum understanding of this sport that we love so much. So sometimes I'll touch on the psychology, but I typically leave that to people who are a bit more well-versed. But on the channel, yeah, breakdowns, previews, some technical studies, even though I've been hit with a couple more copyright claims since we last spoke, G-Man. So I'm going to have to really keep those as treats for you guys. But,
that was what I tried to do with my prediction video, but Sky didn't obviously like it, so I had to redo it all over again.
They don't miss a trick. You can't escape the algorithm.
They're relentless, aren't they? And they were nice and sly. They waited just until I had it premiered, even though I uploaded it hours before. They waited until it was premiered before saying, "Nah, you can't have it."
It's cruel.
It is. But now, Outmatch Boxing, again, you doing your prediction video today for Joshua Usyk, it was fantastic. We will talk a bit about your prediction now in a sec. I just want to shout out a few people in the chats. Jamie, Punch Perfect Boxing, another excellent channel. Another regular guest on here as well. Shout out to him. He's even got his own fans and Ellie Drew. There you go, Jamie. Look at that. There you go. If you spar her at an event, you know what to say. Big up the pound for pound. I already follow Outmatch. Consider a calm and considered opinions always welcome in the world of hype. Boom. So we got a few fans in here, mate.
That warms my heart. Thank you, guys. It means a lot.
Now, obviously, look, we have names in the title, everything. We obviously got to talk about AJ Usyk. I've done my prediction. I'm going, maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going with Joshua to win. Without giving away too much of your prediction video, what are your thoughts about this fight and who are you edging your bets towards? If I gave you a fiver, who would you put it on?
Oh, well, that fiver, I'd be hesitating either way. I have to say that. I feel that this fight, just to provide an overview, I think that this fight is going to be closer than the first one. I think we can expect just as high level skill, but even more drama. I think that this is a really high pressure, high stakes fight that we're going to get on Saturday. And with those kind of fights, it's, as I say, it's difficult to really nail your colours to the mast because you have an idea of one guy winning, but then you can totally understand the other guy winning. However, I've got that £5 note in my hand and I just have to put it on Usyk, to be honest. Yeah.
Usyk, I said it in my prediction, like on paper, realistically, Usyk should win this fight.
Mm.
But I worry a lot about the politics that's involved. At the end of the day, I was worried when I saw some of those scorecards for the first fight.
Yeah.
And a part of me thinks that Oleksandr Usyk, I said this in my prediction video, maybe he worries as well. Because not say worries, but maybe his eyebrows raised when he heard some of those scorecards after that fight and is thinking, I'm not leaving it in the judges' hands. Because he does seem to me, just even from the training footage, to be focusing a bit more on power, more than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a concern. I think even before the first fight, he knew that he was going to be
Mm,
up against it, just by virtue of the fact that he's fighting Joshua, a stone's throw away from Joshua's hometown.
mm-hmm,
All his fans, all his, I say all his judges, but judges that have come over, been brought over by his promotional company, most likely, or the British board once again. Joshua's a Brit, so. I look at Alexander Usyk and he's a very unique personality. Obviously, he's an elite fighter, like
tremendous fighter.
easily one of top three, maybe in the entire sport. But this is someone who consistently has gone over to other guys' backyards,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's just at a point now where he's probably so confident in his skill set because he's done it for so long as an amateur and as a pro that he's like, you know what? I know this is going to be stacked up against me. I know they're going to try and take this fight from me, but I just have to prepare and use that as extra fuel. And I think that's what he does because I watched the first fight over the past couple of days, like really going through it to make my prediction video, and he was just fighting at a blistering pace. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing was, because it wasn't reckless, it doesn't seem like much. But if you look at the activity, there was just so much. Like he really kind of drowned Joshua out of the fight. And Joshua had his moments, but
He
Alexander
did.
Usyk was just really, really on the ball.
It was an interesting one to go back and look at again because you look at it and you just think as well as good as Usyk did and the tempo we set everything in that 12th round. I got the impression I was like, oh my god, he still had loads left. Like
Yeah,
from what he had loads left, and Joshua just had nothing left. And you could really see the more when you start to observe it, how the movement physically, or sorry, mentally fatigued Joshua. You could see
mm,
even in his face when Usyk would have his moments where he would give him the angles where he'd move in, he'd pivot to the side. You kind of see Joshua's face. It was almost like, what the hell am I doing with this guy? What the hell is he doing?
yeah,
He might
yeah.
not admit that, but it did look that way.
You can see it in his face. Josh, he kind of had like a perplexed kind of look. It
Mm.
wasn't a look of concern necessarily. It was more of just confusion. And I think it was, as you say, he just had this man who um, was just so active in front of him, and he couldn't keep up, and he was just bamboozled, for lack of a better term.
It, my head is still kind of like I'm going with AJ, but when we spoke last, we kind of talked about this fight, and at the time, AJ I don't believe had joined the zone. I don't think he had anyway at the time, or maybe he had. I'm not 100% sure. Can't really. I know it was back in June, but AJ going into this fight had pressure on him prior to joining the zone. Now he's with the zone as well, knowing full well that if he wins, sky's the limit. But if he loses, the zone have made an investment in him that's not going to be the best. Do you think that that's even more pressure that maybe he just didn't need?
I think on paper it is. I think that's always going to be the kind of situation that most people feel pressure in. But with AJ, I'm not sure whether he's looking past that and he sees it as his back is up against the wall, so therefore the only way is forward. I'm I don't know whether you've seen much of the media. Not that there's been that many in terms of interviews of AJ, but he does seem to have a bit of a standoffish look in his eye, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been noticing like he's not really doing his usual kind of spiel where he's going off talking about all kinds of unrelated things. He's given very short, concise answers to questions, and I see that as he's just kind of very much in fight mode and probably not thinking about the business side of things.
Yeah, no, he definitely seems to be in fight. But for me, I just think that maybe going into it, like as in the training camp, it's another thing that just you add on top of his money. Maybe AJ can switch it off. I don't know, but he always struck me as someone who would think a lot, overthink things a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's another thing I want to talk about. And I spoke about this in the prediction video. Having Garcia and Fernandez, now they seem on par. They seem to be quite good. But what happens, just in your opinion, this is the way I'm looking at it. What happens if I expect there to be drama in this fight, and I expect both guys to have drama moments.
Yeah.
What if AJ gets hurt or dropped, and we have both trainers, one saying one saying the other, and you have a fighter like AJ who kind of, I believe, needs one direct voice, and he has maybe one saying this, one saying this. Do you think that is a recipe for disaster?
I think it's always hard because we're not insiders. We don't see the dynamics of the team. But I think Angel Fernandez, I don't know too much about him. I've always thought that he was quite a good trainer. Like, he looks like he knows his stuff. He's a bit more new school, so I think he's open to ideas. But forgive my ignorance, but I'm assuming he's still relatively young in his career.
I think he'd be probably in if he's not 30s or 40s. The first I ever heard of him was 2018 when Isaac Chamberlain started training with him. And then he went into Team Joshua, but I don't think he's that old, no.
Well, what I mean by young in his, because I said young in his career, so I mean like
young in his career.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that would have been the first time I ever really heard of him was when Chamberlain went to him, and that was pre-Povetkin. That was after Okoli. So that was the first real time we started hearing about him. So I would imagine he's not crazy extended in his career.
Yeah. So that's the impression I get as well. And I sense that he's probably just going to be as much of a sponge as AJ is, and really respect the authority of Robert Garcia, he's inexperienced with heavyweights, but he still has not only the first-hand experience as a fighter, but as a trainer to fighters of different personality types.
Mm-hmm.
So the proof is going to be in the pudding. But I think, when we're getting shots of the corner in between rounds, I think it'll very much be Robert Garcia being the commanding voice in the corner.
I think so too. I think AJ needs the one voice in the corner. I think Usyk is almost like something that Hatman would say, and this is not a knock on his training setup, but he seems to be someone at this stage who almost has the idea of he knows what to do, even in events of crisis, if you know what I mean. Whereas the corner are really kind of there. Not that he's got a great corner. Anatoly Lomachenko, he did fantastic, but he could probably have Stevie Wonder in his corner and still really know what to do. He'd know what to do himself.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the case. Is you have a fighter with just immense talent and experience, and the trainers there, like, they both have a similar level of knowledge, but the trainer's just that outside pair of eyes, because you can only see so much when you're in the ring, in the midst of the action. But then you have that asset on the outside who's almost like your spy, and they just give you little cues, give you little reminders, sometimes a little boost in motivation. So I think that's what people maybe disregard sometimes, is a coach, a trainer's like, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, sorry. I think you're spot on with that. I mean, if you look at Andre Ward when he fought Kovalev and he got dropped in the second round, he came back as much from Virgil Hunter's speech as opposed to the technical advice, if you think about it, after he got dropped.
Exactly, yeah. And it's
so you can't underestimate that.
Yeah, there you go. It's the kind of the responsibilities of a coach extend more than the technical instruction. Sometimes it's just, you need a coach who's going to understand what you need and when. And I think that kind of maybe brings into question not necessarily Robert Garcia's caliber as a trainer, but has he had enough time to get to know Anthony Joshua?
I don't think he has, personally. I think that there's two types of fighters you could be when getting a new trainer. You could be Tyson Fury and just pick it up like White takes the bread with Sugar Hill Stewart. Yeah. Or you could be an Amir Khan, where you go from Freddie Roach to Virgil Hunter. First few fights you don't look good, but then it clicks and you look brilliant. Which one is Joshua? I suspect he's on the Amir Khan end. rather than the Tyson Fury, but I could be wrong. Like, we just don't know.
Yeah. So much, all of these questions, they're all going to be answered on fight night mostly. But I think AJ, he is a fast learner. I think his career has proven that. But also, if
Oh
you look at
yeah,
his last training setup, the style that I want to say, the Three Musketeers, Angel Fernandez, Rob McCracken, and Joby Clayton, particularly in the Ruiz rematch, Joshua, he was able to stick to it a lot, and that was only a 6-month turnover in reality from
oh yeah.
the the,
It's a short
the
time.
first Ruiz fight to to the rematch. And I don't think he's had 6 months with Robert Garcia. I may be wrong, but I doubt it.
No, I don't think he has. I think it was maybe even April or May. Might have been
Yeah,
April. So we're talking about 4 months roughly. Now I know
yeah,
he did do a bit of probably training with Garcia prior to that when he went on his tour last year. But in terms of solid training with him, I suspect it's less than that. A lot less.
yeah. And that's the thing. Joshua needs as much time as he can get, but he is a fast learner. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
6 months is not. Maybe it's not enough to learn everything he can from Robert Garcia, but maybe it's enough. Maybe it's enough to just get him some breathing room in the fight. Maybe he's picked up a couple of things, a
Mm-hmm.
couple of tricks up his
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sleeve that he can just use to get a foothold in the fight at least. And then he can start to allow maybe his prior experience to come through. And, we know he's got power. We know he's a
Oh
great
yeah.
finisher. Um, but so much of it, I think, depends on his attitude in the fight.
Oh, it definitely does. And I wonder, will there be a come to Jesus moment on fight night where kind of all of what you've said in the build up goes out the window and you are faced with you're faced with the man who beat you. I
Yeah.
wonder what will happen. This isn't like Ruiz where you know what you did wrong. This is a guy who was just, let's face fact, he was just a better man in the night.
Yeah, exactly. That's the cold hard truth of it. I
Mm-hmm.
remember the in the lead up to the Ruiz rematch, I was near certain that Joshua would win.
That's
And
always
it's not
I was convinced he'd
yeah.
win.
And it's not because we're Nostradamus, it's because if you just look at what happened in the Ruiz fight,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Joshua was piecing him up for the first 3 rounds. Thought he miscalculated, misjudged, thought that Ruiz was more finished than he was, got greedy, and Ruiz exposed his lack of punch resistance, but even more so his lack
Exactly.
of recovery abilities.
Exactly.
But Ruiz didn't know what he'd done right. He was
Mm-hmm.
presented with
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity and he took it with both hands. Credit to him, because then he became heavyweight champion. But the rematch clause is there, and
Mm-hmm.
the rest is
And
history.
as you the rest is history. He knew what he did wrong and he didn't do it again.
There you go.
Whereas with this one, it's not like he didn't do anything wrong. He just fought a guy who was just simply better on the night.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
again, it's a case of it's why I'm more intrigued with this rematch because
Mm.
it's like he has changed things, but will that be enough? And with Ruiz, you just kind of thought, okay, look, there's no such thing as a lucky punch, but he got lucky to be in that position to punch with Joshua.
Yeah,
And if Joshua takes that away, well, there's not much he can do about it.
yeah,
So with Usyk, it's like, oh, he can do so much more than that. And if AJ adjusts, he can adjust. It's just I'm looking forward to this fight so goddamn much.
likewise,
Probably
likewise.
more so than the first fight.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think in the first fight, it was definitely. I I I can remember making my pre-fight video for the first fight, and I was just like, I'm so tempted to pick Usyk, but I just don't think the politics will allow him to win.
And
But
that's it.
when he didn't leave any room for them to take it from him, it was like, oh wow,
Yeah.
that was special.
That's the thing though. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't want to base my picks around politics, but that's the problem with boxing, is that it's always there.
Yeah,
It's always bloody there. Like if this was just if there was no politics, Usyk win probably by KO or points decision. But that politics is always going to be there,
mm.
and I can't get away from that. It's sad. It's not a matchroom thing. It's not a UK thing. It's a universal issue in boxing.
Yeah. Money talks and BS walks, unfortunately. But
Unfortunately, mate.
I,
Unfortunately,
that being said, I'm not entirely sure. I don't actually think, in my opinion anyway, on my assessment, I think a points victory for Usyk is fairly unlikely. I'm anticipating that this fight, either way, ends in a stoppage.
Yeah, I can definitely see that for sure. I could see AJ catching Usyk and finishing him. Likewise, I can see AJ punch himself out and Usyk, maybe not even Usyk landing a clean left hand, buzzing AJ and him going in for the finish.
Yeah, it's
It's such an intriguing fight. You recently, just to keep it on AJ Usyk, you had a good video there the other day, done a good few views. Usyk and his weight. Now,
yes.
no sooner did you do that I seen images of AJ where he looked leaner, which
Mm.
is, if it's true, that's a good thing because I did worry that he'd come in too heavy. What do you think the weights are going to be for this? And the reason why I say that is I remember friends of mine a couple of years ago, they'd be more on the casual end, said they hated heavyweight weigh-ins because the guys weren't cutting weight and they weren't dehydrated. But for me, I find heavyweight weigh-ins more interesting because they don't cut weight. And it kind of makes you wonder, oh, Jesus, what's he planning if he weighs this much? Or what's he planning if he doesn't weigh this much?
Yeah. Well, just touching that video is, I think I had a little bit of assistance getting so many views on it, which I've only just found out today.
Just a
Which,
feel. I don't know. It was at 6K views before I did anything. So that was mainly you.
still an extra 1,000 views. So the check's in the mail.
The checks in the
Um,
mail. You know me. You don't have to do anything, man. You don't do anything. It's all good.
um, but yeah, with the weight, it's tough because we are just really doing the eye test, and
Mm-hmm.
weigh-ins, especially at heavyweight, can still be cheated. You know, how many
Oh yeah.
times have we seen heavyweights step on the scales and they got a full tracksuit on? They could have anything in their pockets. But regarding the weight of Usyk, I do think he's going to come in slightly heavier, but slightly. I'd be surprised, very surprised, if he puts on more than 10 pounds. I think,
If even, I wouldn't even go that far.
yeah, I think that's like a real maximum limit. I'd expect 5 pounds, something like that, because Usyk, a lot of people are saying he's putting a lot of mass around the shoulders. Usyk's a big man anyway.
He is.
He's 6'3", naturally, what, 215 pounds probably.
Give or take.
And
Yeah, he's not a twig coming up
yeah,
from light
he's not
heavy.
a
He's a
small man.
unit.
If you look at his head and his like upper torso, his upper back, he's got a very strong build. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think, sometimes the camera can play tricks. A lot of the time, contrary to popular belief, if you're shedding a bit of fat and you get a bit leaner, the definition that you see in your muscles, like the striations and the separations, can
Mm-hmm.
actually make you look bigger.
Oh,
So
for sure.
it could be the case where Usyk has actually um, lowered his body fat, and it's given the illusion that he's a bit bulkier.
I think that's
Um,
something that people don't take into the consideration as well. I mean, most people
yeah,
think that, a bulky, you're obviously bulking, you're only big if you're bulking and kind of BS like that. But you two hit the nail on the head there with that one.
yeah, it's all comes down to visuals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with Joshua, I think I saw the pictures that you focused on in your video.
Mm-hmm.
The one of him, he must have been sparring because I think he had the headgear on and whatnot.
Yeah, he was. He was.
He did look quite slim, I must say.
Mm.
And I was thinking, that's interesting because take it with a pinch of salt because if he's just finished sparring, I
I
don't know
was.
about
It was
um,
something I forgot to touch on. Was
yeah,
that you're sparring in a gym in the bacon hot of Saudi Arabia? You will
exactly,
dehydrate yourself. You will
100%.
even if you're a big unit of a lad, if you're dehydrating yourself, you're gonna have veins everywhere. You're gonna look lean.
Exactly, yeah. Like just purely anecdotally, I'm not a heavyweight. I'm not even particularly close. I went to the boxing gym last Wednesday, and I was there 2 hours. Must have spent an hour and 15 minutes hitting the bag, but it was hard graft. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not as hot as Saudi Arabia here, but it's
It's
low
warm.
30s, indoors hitting the bags. Um, and I came home and weighed myself, and in that 2 hours, I think I was down by like 7 pounds, and that's that's,
Water
as I
away,
say,
loads of water getting drained.
yeah, all that water just drained. The I was sweating before I started, so once I
Yeah,
finished
it's
training, you
hot.
can imagine. And Joshua, he's a big man, so he's got big muscles, going to retain a lot of water. So it's not unheard of for him to look a bit slimmer after X amount of rounds of sparring.
And I think that was something I did forget to touch on. It was only after I uploaded it I remembered, and I was thinking, "Ooh, that would have been a good point."
Yeah.
I hope to God that those pictures are somewhat legit and he is coming in a bit lighter, because I want to look. I want to see a good fight, and I think that if AJ is lighter and leaner, we'll get a much more competitive fight. I think if AJ comes in heavier, like people have been talking about him getting up to the 250s, I'm just like, why? Why?
Bad idea.
And if he does that, well, then I'll make a video. If he weighs in on Friday and he's 250, I'll make a video straight after and saying, going back on my picking Usyk to win.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I don't know if you saw the public workout earlier today, but
I didn't know.
Joshua, this is just my perspective, my opinion. Joshua looked like, I don't think he's actually lost that much weight. I'm willing to put money on the fact that he's probably not lighter than he was for the Ruiz rematch. I suspect he's heavier. So
how much heavier? He was 230 something in the Ruiz fight, wasn't
he? Yeah, he looked good. He looked super sharp. He looked very light on his feet, but he didn't look light to the point where he was weak. He looked very, very springy and energized. Whereas in this fight, I was watching him just go through the motions, and I still think he looked a little bit sluggish. And I know he's not giving too much away, but even when fighters are going at 10, 20, 30% for the public workouts, you can still see a certain kind of sharpness.
Oh, yeah.
With Joshua, I didn't really see it. And I was kind of like, he looks a little bit heavy-legged, looks strong, but not really the kind of condition you'd want to see him in for a fight against Usyk.
You see, I've always kind of felt public workouts, I don't know, I've never really taken them at face value. And I'll tell you a good example. I had so many people tell me when Povetkin fought White last year that Povetkin looked amazing in the public workout. Looked amazing. And then we seen him on fight night. He could barely walk to the ring.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
So I always take what they do in that. I never really, unless they look absolutely horrendous. And even then, I never really take it at face value, because you don't know. I mean, like, that was the biggest kind of, if you want to say, like, real life catfish. Povetkin looking so good in the pads and then looking terrible in the ring.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I remember watching Povetkin on the pads, and I was like,
great, yeah.
I don't actually think he did.
Really not?
No, I remember it because I actually saw Povetkin hit the pads when he fought Joshua. I was looking right over him, seeing him hit the pads. I was like, damn, he looks sharp. But then when I saw the lead up to the White fight, I was like, nah, this guy is caught up to him. He still won the fight, but yeah, I was actually quite confidently picking White after seeing that. And I was like, oh yeah, it's in the bag until that left uppercut. But that's a different story.
It was the same in the rematch. People saying he looked great on the pads, and then it's like on fight night he just didn't have anything. So I never really take it at face value. I mean, you look at David Haye when he was in his prime, he would be hitting them pads with all his might and then be saying, I wasn't even trying.
Yeah, 50%.
Yeah, he's clearly like he's wincing, he's trying to hit that hard. Then he's saying, I was barely trying.
Yeah. He's dog tired and he's got sweat beads dripping down his head.
And he sounds like Katie Taylor. How you doing?
Miss David Haye.
I know. I mean, like, that was the thing. We miss David Haye. Something terrible. As annoying as he could be, I never, ever was unhappy when he was around the boxing, because he was entertained in and out of the ring.
Yeah, that's what you tune in for.
That is what you tune in for, and that's why we need characters in boxing. We need characters in boxing who are also good. And David Haye might not have been the best, but he was good enough. We need characters like that. Yeah,
and for the most part, it was thrills and spills. Maybe minus his comeback fights and the Klitschko fight. It was a good run. Very entertaining.
It was a good run. Shout out to Rob Tebbett, by the way. ID Boxing. Shout out, man. Hope you're having a good time over there in Saudi. We got a few in the chat, man, tonight. 116 in the building. If you could, smash the like button. And I've got Outmatch's channel pinned at the top. There you go. In the comments, if you haven't already, give him a subscribe. Let's do something on Thursday. Man, I'd be happy to. Man, I'd be happy to have you on Thursday. Appreciate that if you would. If you'd love to, man, I'd be happy to do something. Big up. David Hay was more than good enough. He definitely was. But going back onto this fight, though.
Yeah.
You said that in the public workout, you thought AJ still looked a little bit sluggish. Did you see him give much away at all in the public workout? Because I haven't seen it yet. Or do you think that is he going with the me fire with fire approach, or do you think he's going to go and try and box Usyk part 2?
I think it's going to be a mix of approaches from Joshua. I suspect, just kind of considering all the variables, try and envisage the fight in my head. I think Joshua is going to try to impose himself, but not in a reckless way. I think he's just going to aim to have a presence in the ring, and I see Usyk acknowledging that presence. I think Usyk will be wary early on. I think we are going to see a lot of sharpness from AJ, particularly with, I think early on he's going to try and, just whip in a few hard, full-blooded shots. And if they land, they land. But I think at the bare minimum, it's going to just work towards unsettling Usyk. And, it probably won't be the cleanest work early on. But I think in Joshua's mind, he just wants to, as I say, unsettle Usyk, because we spoke about Usyk. He was in his groove from the opening seconds of the first fight.
That's what we talked about. And I think that, I've said this, I think that the first round will tell us how this fight's going to go, I believe.
Yeah.
In terms of who's good. Because you saw, and I noticed that as well, Usyk, in the first 10 seconds, he'd already put AJ on the back foot in the first fight.
Yeah.
And he just done that with just a bit of head movement.
Yeah.
I fully believe if something like that happens again, we're seeing a similar situation. And AJ knew that. You could tell instantly he was kind of like, oh, crap, how did he do that? Put me on the back foot already.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And this is what Usyk does. You see Joshua, he was very one-handed. He was following conventional wisdom. He was using his lead left hand. But you have to factor in that Usyk has almost based his entire skill set on getting through and bypassing that lead hand. And Joshua just didn't have, he had some other tools, but he didn't have the experience. He didn't have the kind of brain processing power that Usyk has from all those years fighting in a particular way. One thing in particular from Joshua is I pointed out in the first fight that you could see that he wanted to add some wrinkles to his game, particularly messing with the distance. He'd step in, he'd step out, similar to what Usyk does. But see, the thing is with Usyk, he also goes side to side, particularly with his head. He also goes up and down. He goes into a lower posture, goes into a taller posture. Joshua was very much just forward and backwards. And he comes into punching range and he's still on the center line. And I still don't think Joshua has developed the body control to land offense off of that center line. And I was looking at the pad work today just for a little sign that he was able to do it. And I didn't see it. So I am looking for a particular thing. So maybe that kind of bias clouds my judgment a bit, but I didn't see stuff from Joshua that I'd want to see, even though he is just going through the motions.
I think with public workouts, I don't think a lot of fighters would get. I think if anything, fighters would also use that to maybe try a bit of misdirection. Possibly. I want to lead with the hook, but I'm going to lead with the uppercut and have them think that that's what I'm working on. Do you know what sort of way, like just to try and hope that maybe one of the team members sees it. Yeah. You touched on something really interesting there, and I want to actually talk about this because I've said this to a few people and I've kind of got mixed reactions to it. But you speak about the experience of Joshua, and look, he's had a great career. We cannot argue he's had a great career. But do you think when all's said and done, we might look back and say, if Eddie Hearn, and it's not Eddie Hearn's fault, maybe that's the wrong way of saying it, but if he hadn't have fought Charles Martin and he'd gone to European level, had maybe a good check there and had a few more fights and then fought for a world title, because they would have vacated him anyway, do you think we'd see a different and better AJ and a more reliable AJ?
You know what? For the longest time, I felt yes. But you know what? The I'm kind of questioning my own thought process on it because I can understand the rationale. Usyk, like in its Joshua he's had all these high pressure fights as soon as he won the title, and
And
he's
just to interrupt you there, sorry, but I think people would say, but he fought Molina and he fought Brazil. They're not high pressure. Yeah, but he has something to lose. Like
exactly,
that
yeah,
heavyweight title is pressure in itself. It might not be much he's in there with, but it adds more pressure.
yeah. I think as you say, he's got the title now, but even before that, for people who maybe aren't from the UK, or they weren't really paying attention to Joshua. Joshua's had the spotlight on him for a long time. Yeah, he wasn't a champion,
It was
but
mental.
he was fighting journeymen and undercards, and people were tuning in.
It was on in every pub. I remember when he fought Jason Gavin. You had people, and
Exactly.
that was on. I forget whose undercard that was, but he wasn't the main event, and you had people everywhere. Might have been Kell Brook when he fought
Kelly
Jojo Dan.
Johnson. Yeah.
Jojo
So,
Dan. Now that was when he fought. That was when he fought Johnson, but when he fought Jason Gavin,
oh
that
yeah.
journeyman,
Yeah.
that was on. I think one of Kell Brook's undercards.
Yeah, I think yeah, I remember the Gavin fight because that was the first fight back after Joshua had that spine injury. Do you remember? He had
Yeah,
the stress fracture.
but you
Um,
people lined up at the pub, like at the TVs, as if it was a world title fight. It's not your journeyman.
yeah, people were coming up to me who I know have never been interested in boxing, but they were interested in Anthony Joshua. So yeah, he didn't have titles, and he wasn't even fighting stellar opposition, but people were just so enthralled by him. So he's had the
Mm-hmm.
spotlight on him. He's had the pressure on him. Quite literally, the weight of a nation, the expectations of the nation on him. So as soon as he's had those world title fights, it's just tenfold. He goes in to fight Klitschko in the unification. Now it's tenfold again. And it's just, I can understand you have the rationale, and I did as well for the longest time, that Joshua has performed this well under such immense pressure.
It's
Imagine if he
crazy.
didn't and he had those development fights, would he be better? But and I kind of think maybe it's the pressure that Joshua has needed, and that's
Mm.
what has accelerated his learning. Because I don't know, like if people remember, but leading up to the Klitschko fight, Joshua just seemed to turn it up by several notches in the preparation for that fight, and he looked like
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
freakish athlete. And it was because there was that pressure fighting Klitschko in front of 90,000. Maybe that's the pressure that's made him special.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the best fights I've seen. I mean, I'll never forget that fight. I couldn't believe they even made it, and then when it happened, it was like it lived
Yeah.
up. That was brilliant. I'll never forget that fight.
Yeah. Same. I remember that day so vividly. It was almost like a public holiday because
Yeah,
everyone
well,
was just talking about it.
it was. I don't get. I love boxing, but there's very seldom I get really heart beating out my chest for a fight, if you know what I mean, as in like that excited. You know what I mean? I'm always excited, but where it's just like it's all you can really think about. That was one of them, and I'll never forget the build up for that. It was I just couldn't wait for that fight.
Yeah. The BBC made an hour-long documentary on it. Like,
Oh,
that's
it
how you know
was,
it's serious.
and it lived up. Thank God for that as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank, thankfully it did.
And I wonder. I think this fight will. I do think
Yeah.
it will. We've already think what it is. We've talked for 40 minutes just on this one fight. And there's other things
Yeah.
happening in boxing, but with so much to talk about this fight, we can put 40 minutes of work in.
Yeah. It speaks for itself. This really is a top quality fight.
Just letting you know now, right? I'm gonna change it up. We're gonna talk about Ben Eubank. If this
Yes.
stream kicks me, because it might kick me in the next minute or two, don't panic. I will be back. But we'll talk about Ben Eubank. What do we think? Ben Eubank, October 8 with a rehydration clause, less than the IBFs. What are your thoughts?
Ah, well, uh, I'm going to sound like a massive hypocrite. I think that this is a stupid fight but
You'll watch it.
I kind of can't wait for it. Yeah, there's something there's something about it. It's I think more than anything, I know we're going to get good build up because the press conference the other day was already like I was
Fun.
there glued to my TV. Like it was just so compelling, but not because it was like a quality matchup. It's just because of the back and forth. For once, like I can't remember the last time I actually enjoyed Eubank's trash talk, but yeah, he did a good job trash talking Benn the other day. Yeah, I think it's a silly fight. Both guys have it all to prove in their own divisions. This is not the same situation as Triple G versus
I'll let you
Gilbert.
talk for 1 sec, mate, and I'll be back in 1 sec. Just because I know it's going to boot me now, okay?
Yeah, sure. I'll entertain the fans. So, yeah, while Gman is away, I'd just like to plug my channel. Thank you for those who have subscribed already. It's greatly appreciated. And yeah, just if you could help me get to 1,000 subs, that would be it would be an honor. But yeah, just while G-Man is away, let's check the old sub count. Why don't we? Look at that. 929. You guys, something else. 132 viewers. For reference, when I do a live stream, I get 6. I was just having a one-to-one with the audience.
Yeah, you can see the comments as well. You can see it all there. No, you were chatting about Ben Eubank saying as much as you don't like it, you're still going to watch it.
Yeah, and it's it's one of those fights where, as I say, it's not like Kelbrook versus Triple G. That was different.
Was different.
Triple G was genuinely an avoided fighter, and Kelbrook, yeah, he wasn't necessarily he hadn't proven himself to be the best at welterweight, but I remember looking back and I felt that Kelbrook was the best at welterweight at the time, and it was a bit of a circus kind of fight, but he had it all to gain. Whereas, yeah, Ben has a lot of it's a legacy fight, I guess, and he has a lot of credit to gain. But there's no hardware, there's no belt on the line. And Eubank Jr.,
Yeah,
that I think I almost want to say it's shameful
I
that
think he's
he's
resigned himself that he just wants the money.
yeah. I mean, he's kind of he's saying the right things because he's saying, look, I only have to be 60% to win this fight. And I suppose that kind of it's a bit more gracious, because if you're saying this is going to be one of the toughest fights of my career, then that would be like very egregious, like despicable marketing. But I think it's going to be an interesting fight.
I think that if the zone are smart, they will plug the you-know-what out of this. They will have face-offs with Nigel and Senior. Maybe even do a gloves are off with them two to get as much interest and build the nostalgia as they could. Even if it was a case of showing highlights of both dads' fights. Do anything to get as much nostalgia into this fight as you can. Because I think that this fight will sell. Like, I mean, it's already sold out. It'll sell to the casual audience. It's smart in a sense of this will coincide with actually, I was going to say the Canelo Triple G pay-per-view. If people are buying that, but it'd be mainly the kind of hardcores in the UK who would buy it. But if there's some casuals buying it, they'll have the zone for the month. They'll be able to get like that plugged at them nonstop as well.
Yeah. I think it is a good move by DAZN because at the bare minimum, there's going to be that nostalgia factor. And there is intrigue as well because Conor Benn, he does have momentum. And
he definitely does.
Yeah. And Eubank Jr., not so much. He had a good performance against Williams, but...
The momentum he had 2017, that was the height of his momentum.
Yeah. After he stopped Yildirim. Yeah. Because he looked like, okay, this guy's really moved into a new chapter of his career.
He did.
It was ground to a halt by the George Groves fight.
That was a proper, imagine you're in like a jet plane and you've got no fuel and it just comes crashing down. That's the best way to
Yeah.
describe it. It took off, it shot up into the air, and it just came crashing down. That's what happened in that George Groves fight.
Yeah, it was a very, very rude awakening because even
Oh,
when he got Groves into the kind of fight he wanted, like just the dog fight, Groves was still, holding his own and probably even getting the better of some of those exchanges. Is like, oh wow, you can't even bank on your trump card anymore.
oh,
Um, and I think that's been a lot of the case with Eubank is there is quite a bit of smoke and mirrors going on with his career because
oh, hell yeah.
he has some very formidable strengths, but they're very situational. And I think he has been picking his fights very, very carefully.
He definitely has. But saying that, I think he's going to be Conor Benn. Like
Yeah,
I just can't see anything other than a Eubank win, probably in style early enough, reasonably early. I just no disrespect to Conor Benn, but I just think that it's just I just can't see him winning this fight. I really can't. And I guess for Eddie Hearn, it's a case of, well, better to lose against Eubank and say you went up 2 weight divisions than to fight a Staniones or an Avanesian, someone who is, for them is not, it's a kind of, if you lose to them, it's like, why are you losing to them? Whereas if you lose to Eubank, you've got an excuse and you've made money and you can start
yeah,
the rebuilding again. You can rebuild them slowly again.
mm. Yeah. I that's a good point because for example, the Avanesian fight is one that's been spoken about recently, and
Mm-hmm.
personally, I think Ben beats Avanesian, but
I would give it to Avanesi, but not as I wouldn't. I was super confident in him beating Josh Kelly, not as confident in him beating Benn.
yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's. I can understand that personally. I just think Ben has the style to beat him. Maybe Ben's a little bit too green because his performances have flattered him a little bit.
The thing about Benn, right, is he's never fought a puncher. Now, I wouldn't say Avanesian is a devastating puncher, but he certainly hits harder than Chris Van Eerden and Chris Algieri with that type
Oh
of
yeah,
pressure. It's
yeah,
educated pressure. It's not just reckless, here you go. He was able. Josh Kelly, I would say, is a better mover. Well, certainly he's more athletic than Conor Benn, but Avanesa was able to get him just in the trenches.
yeah. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I just think that Josh Kelly maybe lacks the intensity of a Conor Ben,
Yeah,
and I think
definitely.
sometimes that intensity it can be your best friends, especially
Mm.
when you get into a firefight. And I'd still see it as a close fight, but I think Ben would just maybe be able to land on Avanesian a bit too easily. And I mean, we'll never know until the fight or if the fight ever happens. But
I mean,
even if he fought Avanesian and won, how much is he going to make from that fight? 100 grand, 150
yeah,
grand, maybe?
in or around that, like, and you got to figure that, like, at welterweight, it's such a stacked division that, like, fringe world level would probably be world level in another division. Do you know what sort of way? Like, it's that tough a division.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. It's like the fringe world level guys, they're still world level talents, but they just haven't had the opportunity to fight for a title yet. So
I know.
it's a hard division.
It's a really interesting one. And the thing that people are saying, okay, look, it's not the same as Golovkin versus Brook in that regard. But what if it's a bad loss for Conor Benn?
Hmm.
Like, how would that affect him moving forward? I mean, look, just mention Josh Kelly, bad loss against Avanesian. He looks like a shell of himself. And he's only
Yeah.
24, 25.
I think I don't think Eubank is as destructive as Golovkin.
No.
So I anticipate him stopping Conor Ben, but I don't think it's going to be the most damaging loss of Ben's career. I think it's going to be something that, as you say, it's going to be, we took a risk, we stepped up. Now we're just going to carry on with our campaign where we were at welterweight. I could be completely wrong, but I don't get that sense. With Golovkin, he ruined Kell Brook.
He
Well,
bashed him up.
yeah, he knocked a considerable amount of years off his career. Um, but that's because Golovkin was a machine.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it just goes to show now, because even at this advanced stage of his career, he can still flatten a big middleweight like
Like
Murata, who,
Murata.
yeah, a bit rudimentary, but a big, strong, tough guy with plenty of
Mm-hmm.
heart, flattened him.
Flattened him like a bloody banana. That was crazy. And that's an old Golovkin. You can only imagine what Kell Brook was in for.
Yeah, arguably Golovkin at the peak of his powers.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And that fight, I kind of echo what Hatman says in a sense of no one put a gun to Brook's head and said, take it. There was a longer road that had less money but would have led to more money if you got the wins. And I think he would have got the wins over Vargas and people like Thurman. But he chose money now, worry about it later. And I think it cost him. I think it cost him a better career. I think it cost him more big money fights. I think that he looked at the road that has, the open door rather than walking all the way down there and getting the door that maybe was a bit further down but had more bags behind it.
Yeah, it was a trade-off. You can have the instant gratification, but the massive risk, or you can have the investment, take the hit to the ego by getting paid less, but you have a more secure route to glory. Fighters, they do need advice, they do need advisors, but at the end of the day, they get paid to fight. And if you present them with an opportunity and they accept it, they're adults. Nobody forced them to get into boxing. Nobody's forcing them to take the fights. Hopefully, I know there's some shady business in boxing, but we hope it's clean and consensual. But with Benn, I think he's been preparing for this day, because ever since he turned pro, I'm sure it's just always been, probably casual fans come up to him and they don't understand that him and Eubank Jr. are in different weight classes. They're like, when are you going to fight Eubank Jr.? And in his mind, he's probably been thinking, I might not be able to break out and be a star unless I fight this guy.
Do you remember when he turned over first? They were on a lot. That was when Eubank was still fighting Matchroom. They were on a lot of the same cards.
Yeah, on the Joshua cards, like the Brazil cards.
They made sure both of them were on it. And I remember he had an altercation. It might have been in his second or third pro fight with Eubank Senior at a press conference. Now, it was just a kind of verbal altercation, but in hindsight, you can kind of see, like, Jesus, maybe were they trying to do that back then? Like, were they thinking about it back then?
I think the idea has always been that, and I've always said, before they retire, this has to be a fight that gets made. It's an opportunity that can't be missed. And it's a little bit of a circus act, but it's not completely nonsensical. You can understand the rationale, but I just think it's not the right time. Personally.
No.
And I think that's probably the general consensus on this fight.
I think that Eddie has been trying to really sell this fight as being, better for Benn, saying he's 170 pounds in the ring in his last fight. I wouldn't believe that for the world, considering the fact that he looked small at welterweight, and you're telling me he can be how do I describe it? He can have so much energy cutting 23 pounds or rehydrating. Like, nah. Kell Brook wasn't rehydrating that much, and he looked sluggish at times, a lot sluggish in there. So I think they're really trying to make sure that they get, like, they're trying to make everyone think like, oh yeah, Benn's just as big.
Yeah, I think the 170 pound number, I'm not sure if I believe that. I don't think he's far off, to be honest, because I saw a clip of Conor Benn from one of his first 3 fights, might even have been his debut, and he looked much smaller. So he's definitely filled out. He's definitely developed his man strength, and he's considerably stronger. But even then, just because he weighs in at 170 pounds and he spars big guys like Felix Cash, he still hasn't had a fight against a legit middleweight, and that's what Eubank Jr. is. People said the same thing about Kell Brook. Yeah, he's a big welterweight, but being a big welterweight is not being a middleweight. It's
exactly
not the same.
I mean, you and me have been around boxing gyms. We see plenty of welterweights sparring middleweights, but it's not the same as being in a fight with them.
Exactly. You'll very rarely spar someone your own size. You go to your gym, there's probably, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 guys, depending on how big your gym is, who are the exact same weight as you. The rest of the time, you're fighting guys slightly smaller, slightly bigger. If it's super technical sparring, then you could probably go, a bit further in either direction. But being in there and feeling the force and the physicality of someone like Eubank Jr., who just completely ragdolls regular size middleweights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't see
I
it
don't.
ending well.
Mm.
I really don't see it ending too well. I
I
really don't.
think.
And
Um,
before I go, just if right, as I said, Conor Benn has never been in there with a big puncher, a really big puncher.
yeah.
Eubank's not a devastating puncher, but everyone who's fought him, George Groves as well, has said, no, he's got heavy hands.
Mm.
If he's never been even hit by a big puncher really in sparring full force, what's going to happen when he gets hit by Eubank in 10-ounce gloves with decent power? It's going to be a shock to the system, more so as well.
Um,
Do you
I,
think?
I I'm not sure, to be honest. I think it depends on what shot he gets hit by Eubank Jr. because Eubank Jr. at long range,
Yeah,
like
he's
the jab,
not,
the right hand, there's not much on
not
it.
really much on it, yeah.
Um, However, when he gets into his wheelhouse and the right uppercuts start coming in and the body shots, that's when Eubank Jr. shines. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
just wondering for how long can Conor Benn hold Eubank Jr. off, even if it's not with full-blooded power shots, but just showing him different looks, being kind of wily enough at long range where Eubank Jr. isn't the best. Can he maybe go into later rounds? But I do think
Billy Joe could do
eventually,
it, George Groves could do it, but they are like Billy Joe is made for that type of boxing. George Groves is massive.
yeah,
Conor Benn is neither.
that's it. That's true.
Yeah.
Um,
Conor Benn is no Billy Joe, and he's no George Groves in terms of sheer size, natural
yeah,
strength.
yeah, that's a good point.
So
Um,
I see where people make comparisons, and at the end of the day, people say Conor Benn's punching power. You will not ever convince me that Conor Benn hits harder than George Groves. And yeah,
Not
he
in a
was buzzed.
million
He was
years.
buzzed by George Groves. Yes, he was, but Conor
Yeah,
Benn does not have that kind of power. No way.
no, George Groves was people like
His
they
power was
recognized he was a
tremendous.
puncher, but I never thought that people truly gave George Groves um, his punching power the credit that he deserved because he was a legit puncher for
Oh
super
man,
middleweight.
I mean, like Carl Froch had a tremendous chin, and
Yeah,
no one hurt him like George Groves did.
that's
If
it.
you, I'm telling you now, if you're doing that to Carl Froch, you've got power.
Exactly.
And if you're taking his shots, Conor Benn's not on par with that. It doesn't matter how much people say it, he's not going to punch like that.
Mm, yeah. So it is definitely a hard one to see how Ben wins this fight. I think he can maybe at times make Eubank Jr. look a bit clumsy, but I think that's going to be the kind of
The height of it.
the be all and end all of his success in that fight. Yeah.
Big up to Chris Andre in the building. Boys just logged on. I'll have to rewind the first 53 minutes. We had a good discussion, Chris. You'll enjoy it. Big up to you, my man. Big up to Chris Andre every single time. One of the
Yes.
best. One of the best on YouTube. Love his prediction videos. He's actually got his technical breakdown for AJ Usyk already
Oh,
uploaded. So once we finish here, man, I think me and you are going to be literally like clicking on that video straight away.
yeah. Get your popcorn ready.
Get your popcorn. It's 18 minutes, so I'm going to have a nice 18-minute listen.
That's it.
Shout out to Chris Andre every time, man. Great guy. Absolutely great guy. But, mate, we've gone for nearly an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this up now. Now it's a quick hour. Listen, there's still 107 people in the building. So if you could smash the like button, that would be appreciated. But before we go, I'm going to put the floor to you again, put you out on the spot. Outmatch boxing. There's 107 more people in here than there was at the start. Want to get you to 1K subs. On to you. Let's have the outro.
Okay, so Outmatch Boxing, if you have an appreciation for the sweet science of boxing, the technical, the tactical, the biomechanical, maybe some stuff that you've never even appreciated before. I like to bring a new perspective, an objective perspective, unbiased, as real as it gets. Of course, alongside the other members of the Boxing Brotherhood, Gman, Chris Andre, Boxing on the
Boxing
Edge
on
and
the edge,
Hatman.
Hatman.
So yeah, it's just another opinion from a complete stranger online, to quote Dwyer.
I was gonna
But
say, yeah, it's the Wire fan there.
yeah, the OG, the Godfather. So yeah, that's just what I bring is technical, tactical. Sometimes cover the boxing news as well. Just a good platform to have intelligent discussion about boxing.
And as he said, unbiased, unobjective, or objective,
Objective, yeah.
which is what we want. You know,
Of
I
course.
personally don't like going on the channels that I know are fanboy channels. I know people don't like that. With me and Outmatch, with everyone in the boxing brotherhood, we all know you're going to get objectivity. That's the way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how we learn, is being objective. We challenge each other's views, we challenge our own, and we continue to grow our knowledge of the sport and enjoy it even more.
Fatally Dumb just says a great video. Cut 1 minute 25. Big up Outmatch. You've got a sub there.
Thank you very much, my friend.
Big up. But people, I'll leave it at that. Hopefully y'all enjoy it. We might see if we can get another one of these up with another guest before the end of the week. But for now, I'll leave you. Smash the like button on the way out. Thanks a mil, people, for joining. Outmatch. Pleasure as always, mate. Always have a place on this channel, man. Anytime.
Thank you, Gman. Thanks for having me, and thanks to the viewers.
Big up to everyone.
Have a good night, folks.
Peace. Cheers, mate.